I got three of my really good friends. Sylvia Demarest is a retired attorney. She's going to come to us tonight live from Louisiana. Maria Nikolakaki, retired professor just recently. She's from Greece. And Lisa Savage, longtime good friend and fellow troublemaker in Maine. She is coming to us from California, where she's visiting with family. Um, I want to welcome you all to the show. And let me ask you this, uh, until I call on you, mute your microphone. So sometimes we get some background and some interference. Perfect. That's good. So I wanted to do the show tonight and to begin talking about, are there any hopeful signs as we look around the world, across the United States and Europe, uh, and throughout other parts of the world? Um, so that's what I would like to talk about. I'd like to ask your opinions on that. And then I suspect, given where we're going to go with this conversation, um, I'll ask each of you what you think about this ongoing genocide uh, in Gaza. I know it has so many people troubled. So I'm going to begin with Lisa. Lisa, you go ahead and take it away. You start first. Do you see any hopeful signs where you've been? You've been out on the streets, I know, a lot with signs and trying to invite more people to come out and get educated and learn and to protest against American military activity right now in Gaza, but you've been protesting it from really all over the world. So what are your thoughts?
I definitely thank you, Regis, for inviting me, and it's nice to meet you, Sylvia and Maria. This is a great opportunity, I think, to put our heads together. I'm feeling pretty hopeful lately because as a longtime resistor of U.S. militarism and the imperialism around the world that has entailed, I've often lamented that not more people are interested in pushing back on that. Like it's, they say, well, we need jobs, or, oh, those, fill in the blank is the enemy du jour and we can't let them trump all over us. But the genocide in Palestine, obviously that is has been going on for a long time. The displacement of the Palestinian people, the land theft, the attempt to just eradicate them from that part of the world has been going on a long time. But the fact that it's ramped up to the level of genocide in Gaza over the last, I think we're 8 months in at this point, has brought a lot more people, and especially young people, out to actively resist. And I take that as a hopeful sign. I'm 67 years old. I'm a retired school teacher, so I like being around young people. I'm finding increasingly that I'm learning from young people. They aren't school age. They aren't even really college age, although there's some of that too, more like 20s and 30s. They're really fired up. They're really well informed, intelligent. They have different ways of a different culture of working together. They have different sources of information than I typically do. And I find it very encouraging. One of the families that I've been active within, like trying to basically shut down weapons manufacturers here in our area for a day. Sometimes it's Elbit, sometimes it's General Dynamics bomb factory. There's a Iraqi American family that's very involved. And one of the younger members of that family, who's a resident doctor right now, very demanding, career and ton of student debt. But he said, my father always said, if we don't build a multi-generational movement, it won't succeed. We've got to have the various generations involved for it to have legs. And I'm really seeing that in action. And that to me is hopeful, even though the reasons we're doing it are horrible and horrific. And one can only consume so many images and so much information from this slaughter of children in Gaza before, you feel like you can't go on living. So I try to limit my exposure. I need to know that it's happening. I don't need to look at every single image over and over. And I try to respond to things like that with, what am I going to do about it, rather than many people. And I understand that they just become overwhelmed and debilitated by depression and despair when faced with, man's inhumanity to man. But I guess my response is to get busy and get with other people who feel as I do and try to do something to gum up the works.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, and then both Sylvia and Maria, I'd like to have their ideas on these two things as well. Number one, you are out there in the streets. It's almost entirely in Maine. You're on a little holiday right now, I guess, visiting family, but you and others are out there weekly and sometimes daily. How is it that these young people and younger people, and not just younger people, but others, are finding you? Is it because you're on a street corner somewhere and somebody sees you and they decide to come and join you? And the second thing is, what's your take on, I've been following it, recently anyway, the protests breaking out on campuses, not only in the United States, but all across the world. So what are your thoughts on those two things? Where and how are people coming to the movement, if we can call it a movement? And what's your take on, this incredible involvement on university campuses?
Well, those are good questions, Regis. I would say to the first one, I am increasingly finding that any sort of action, it might be a direct action or it might be a protest, has increasingly people, when we circle around after or talk amongst ourselves about how'd you get here, people say, I was just walking by and I saw you. A reporter who covered us a couple weeks ago in a college town said, I just saw you walking down the sidewalks and I jumped up from my table in the cafe and ran outside and started covering it. So I think part of it is just being visible and being seen. But of course, with younger people, it's social media where they are finding the information about where to and how to get involved. There are platforms that are encrypted, that are more high security than, say, a Google chat or something that they tend to use. I, of course, am a blogger. I've been a blogger for years about resisting the U.S. empire and its war on the poor around the globe. So sometimes it's through my blog or sharing of blog posts. Particularly Substack, I think, has become a very productive network, at least in the U.S., of people that are interested in resisting. And I forgot what your second question was. Oh, the campus uprisings. Yeah, I'm old enough to have. I wasn't in college when the Vietnam War campus uprisings were happening. I was like in high school, but I'm old enough to remember all that. And then it kind of went away in the US. And I always kind of assumed it was because they figured out, like, don't have a draft. If you have conscription into the military, you're going to get a lot more pushback on these forever wars. But 9/11 created this false sense of, emergency, and really ramped up Islamophobia. And then basically was the pretext for all these, various war on terror military actions. But the young people that are in college today, again, they have social media. That's why the U.S. Congress wants to ban TikTok, because they see exactly what's happening in Gaza, in Palestine, from their social media posts. And then they feel like, my conscience won't allow me. So many people I've heard make that statement, like, I can't live with myself unless I do something. So I think, of course, there's peer, if not pressure, but peer influence, and it feeds on itself. But that's been a very encouraging sign. And those young people are risking a lot more than I am. I'm a retired school teacher who owns my own home. Really, what can the empire do to me? But a young person that's just sunk a whole bunch of money into their university education to not get a diploma, not get the degree at the end of that is taking a huge risk. And then also they're risking their employability. the doctors or the college instructors that I'm out there on the streets with. They're worried about their employer firing them. So I have a lot of respect for how much more of a risk young people take by doing this than, say, somebody like me takes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Lisa. I wish that a lot more Russian people could hear these kinds of things from you. And I'm sure we're going to hear more from Sylvia and Maria. So, Maria, I'll come to you now. So, what's your perspective from over there in Greece, where the economy is tanked? I know there's been a lot of pressure and a lot of political turmoil, but how do you see things? Are you at all hopeful?
First of all, I would like to thank you, dear Regis, for inviting me and these wonderful ladies. I think it's a very genuine invitation to call women who are mostly not much invited in other talk shows, and I appreciate your belief in us and presenting us in your show. I would like to add to this discussion the recent European elections. They were a shock to the liberal center, what Tariq Ali calls extreme center, which I, in my book, presented as neo-fascist center, because what neoliberalism is all about is about corporations, allowing corporations to take over, and then by compromising leadership in countries, drag the countries into the globalist agenda, which is about destroying their economies. It is about destroying their identities through LGBTQ plus agenda, which is actually a precursor to transhumanism. And also all this transfer of wealth from the workers and the middle class up to the upper classes through the climate crisis or hoax. So I think we need to see how people are really very much angry with the extreme center. And we saw it in France, where the Macron government, which is pro-war, it was preparing to send troops to Russia, to Ukraine, to fight Russia. It was about to build a EU military. I mean, that's all coming to pieces. And now Le Pen, which is ultra-right, a nationalist presentation, is taking the lead. She was voted 2 times more than Macron was. We saw in Belgium, the current prime minister got a record low of 5% of the votes. I mean, that was humiliating. We saw in Germany, Scholz and the Green Party with Baerbock got really ridiculed. And in general, all the EU countries that were pushing for war with Russia have been devastated, and they are being put in the corner. Rishi Sunak in UK has called for elections. He doesn't want to be a war president. Macron is having elections later this month. So things are changing, and the people through the European EU elections, which is rather a referendum vote, show that they are not willing to sacrifice their living standards to follow NATO and US empire to actually create havoc to EU's economy. I think that the sanctions that USA made EU follow have already shown signs that they have been destroying their economy. Plus all these budgets that have been going to Ukraine without anyone voting for them, plus all the rhetoric from the unelected Ursula von der Leyen, which is like the empress of EU, have at last started to wake European people, and they don't want to be destroyed over this imperialist project to use Europe to wage a war on Russia, like World War II, and have Europe's economy destroyed so that US can come back with some Marshall plans and rebuild what it pushed to be destroyed. So I think that these that's a hopeful sign. I'm looking forward to see how the French vote and the British vote. It seems in Britain that the ultra-right and the ultra-left are getting more votes. But I want to, at this point, to clarify that these labels are put by the extreme right and extreme center, sorry, and the definition of patriotism and love of country has become something that has been labeled from the extreme center as ultra something. So George Galloway's in UK is ultra right, and the other candidate for the extreme right, forgot his name now, is getting more votes and is more presented. And so it seems that people are working towards an alternative for this neoliberal, globalist, transhumanist agenda. As for the struggle for Palestine, I mean, I wrote this article today for Press TV, and it's my opinion is that from the beginning of its creation, Israel has been created on certain agreements that Israel has not followed. So even in the Balfour Declaration, which was signed between the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Britain and Lord Rothschild, there were explicit references that the Palestinians would not be decimated and their lives would be respected. To the UN declaration in 1948 between, that was when UN was not even properly formulated. It had only 48 states, I think. So the announcement, the declaration of the creation of the Israeli state was made by 33 members. 13 voted abstention, and one did not take part. One country did not take part. So, I mean, and there were specific mentions that Israel had to accept the right to return of Palestinians. That was never followed. So we have this state, 75 years, the occupying state, which has made it has made the Palestinians a nation that has no rights on their own land. They're being killed by mowing the lawn. They have been, settlers have been taken inch by inch the designated areas that that the Palestinians were decided to control, and no UN resolutions against Israel have been obeyed. On the other hand, one decision of UN at the beginning in 1948 was enough to create the state of Israel. So what I think that people are waking up on this, they can see that Israel is a colonizer settler state, which has been destroying and exterminating Palestinians for over 75 years. And what has been seen cannot be unseen. So these two things, I think, are optimistic for our future. The people are waking up, and the Palestinian cause has at last been exposed to the world, and lights have been shed onto it.
Maria, let me ask you this. You and I both know that Europe and the European people, their primary focus has been on what's happened to their economies because of this war that the United States is waging and forcing Europe to go along with it, where the gas has been cut off for the most part. Inflation is sky high. Factories are closing. People have lost jobs. This is across the continent. Is there any room, for people to be worried about Gaza? Do you see signs that there are growing numbers of people, and I want to know, students across Europe that I know they're realizing that the governments don't respect them, don't serve their own needs, but do they have time? And are there many people rising up against what's happening in Gaza? Are they connecting the dots, in other words?
I think that Lisa stated it very well before when she said that students are saying that how can I live with my conscience if I am silent when genocide is happening? So these are human values. I believe strongly that humanity here is at stake. If you can watch a genocide, if you can see children being killed in the daylight, and you do not care about it, then there is a deep psychological problem. Sorry, but this is how it is. And so I think that the Palestinian cause, which is a humanitarian cause, which is a justice cause, it's more about humanity than only Palestinians. Palestinians, their cause was able to waken our humanity, which had started drifting apart from all the capitalist problems that we were faced through all these neoliberal years. And I think that it might seem overstated, but I think that we owe the Palestinians this awakening up of our psyche, of our soul, to feel the injustice and to shout it out and to connect with other people and to fight for the end of this war.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. You and I have talked about this transhumanism, which is really an attack on our humanity. And if you look at everything that's going on in the world with the advent of AI, digital currencies, face recognition cameras everywhere, all of this connected, some of us can see the handwriting on the wall. Sylvia, I want to come to you now. Comment on anything here you want, but one thing I hope that you would comment on at some point in the discussion tonight, I see it as a very hopeful sign. Maybe other people don't, but the significant move away from the dollar. The BRICS movement and BRICS countries are rapidly now using their own currencies for trade. They're getting rid of the U.S. debt bonds that China and Russia have been holding. And Saudi Arabia recently not renewing this contract, a 50-year-old contract with the United States. To me, this is very hopeful. So Sylvia, how do you see all of this?
Well, first of all, I want to comment or say that both Lisa and Maria's comments have been very insightful and very helpful. What I think is going on is that the political, economic, social, and militarization that we see going on all over has reached the point where many people have realized that without significant change, their future is not very optimistic. If you look at young people today, for example, in order to be able to become educated enough to participate in the economy, they have to take on debt that becomes unpayable and leads to a life basically as a debt slave. The cost of living in the United States, at least, has become unaffordable, whether or not you're talking about the cost of housing, the cost of transportation, the cost of medical care. All of these costs are now weighing on people to the point where one of my nephews here in the Louisiana area is a service manager at a major dealership, and he's reporting that people cannot afford to have their cars worked on. So all of these crises in terms of economics and socialization and politicization and the militarism that we see going on all over have reached a crisis point where people realize that their future depends upon major change taking place. And in order for that to happen, I think there needs to be a great awakening, which I see going on really around the world. There have been several crises that have participated and affected this in the United States. I think the first was the realization among liberals, even through the election of Barack Obama and his failure to carry out the promises of his campaign, that politics alone were not going to be able to deal with these problems. Then we had the shock of Donald Trump's election, which should have been an indication to the powers that be that large numbers of the American population were unhappy with their social, economic, and political condition. And then we had the shock of COVID, where we realized, I think a lot of people realized, that there was a real effort to control every aspect of human behavior to the point where they could mandate that people take medication that they did not want to take, that had not been properly tested and did not work as advertised, and that they could lose their job, that they could be excluded from social society. And I think this led to a realization that this was all part of an international effort to control every aspect of human life. And as far as Maria's comments about what's going on in Gaza and what that means, I think people are seeing what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Ukraine, and realizing that those kinds of wars and social control and weaponization techniques are going to be perpetrated on them unless there is substantial social change on the horizon. And people are not optimistic that that kind of social change is possible, but I am. If conditions for life become so unbearable for people that they realize that politics have become meaningless, in that we know now from the studies at Cambridge and other places that what people think and what the people want and what they vote for is not what's taken into consideration in the halls of Congress in the United States, that money matters, and that in various areas, our Congress people and senators and the White House itself has basically been purchased. Israel and Zionist money has purchased the Congress on Israeli policy. The military-industrial complex has purchased the Congress on military policy. Monopolization of the various aspects of human life, where various monopolies control everything, has purchased the representatives that control that aspect of policy. And so in the absence of a broad-based social movement that defines the areas that need to be investigated, and to me, those areas are the monopolization of human life by a few corporations globally, where maybe 3 or 4 corporations that really do not compete against each other control every aspect of that particular part of the economy. The co-op of medicine and the pharmaceutical industry, where you can no longer trust that the medications that are being provided will do more good than harm. We saw that through the COVID crisis, where although it's still being completely censored, people in the know realize that most of what we're hearing about long COVID and some of the other things are really the result of the dangerous aspects of the COVID shot and what it does to the human immune system, to the human vascular system, to the human brain. And I think you can see that in many different areas of medicine, where now private equity companies are coming in and buying up dental practices and vision practices and medical practices. They bought up a lot of hospitals, and all of those prices and controls are just completely absent now, and quality is going down, cost is going up. And then you see the militarism, and you see the cost of that militarism. I saw an article today that the cost of the armaments to go to Ukraine has skyrocketed, so that now they're saying it would take $800 billion to fight Russia. And then you see that what the monopolization and what the concentration of wealth and power has done in terms of people being able to combat these forces. And so at some point, a critical mass of people look at their lives and say, I do not have a future in this system because I am priced out of a decent life. I do not have a future in this system because my basic humanity is at stake, because there are forces that want to control every aspect of my behavior, who want to corral me into 15-minute cities and monitor every moment of my life, and where every effort is being made to control the food supply and to control farmers and to make sure that people do not have access to food products that are healthy, and instead have to accept the food products of the monopoly system. So I think that we're seeing that taking place. We're also seeing what the result of this degree of concentration of wealth has produced in terms of political power. When you know and you can see that what has gone on in Israel for 75 years violates every tenet of human behavior, and that now it has become that kind of violence, and that degree of lack of respect for other people has become ingrained in society itself, where 80% of the Israeli society say that not enough force is being applied in Israel. These are all expressions of an illness that has been injected into human society as the result of concentration of wealth, monopolization, militarization, and the effort to control the human population so that this concentration of wealth can be preserved and perpetuated. I think people are sick of it. I think there's examples in human history where this kind of power can be opposed successfully. And I see signs of optimism that a movement like that is possible. What needs to happen is we need to be able to come together in terms of what the objectives are, because right now there are lots of techniques that are being employed to basically divide and conquer. These techniques have been studied extensively in the advertising industry. In DARPA, we've seen efforts to create a narrative and to control the information that enters into the narrative so that the response from people can be controlled. And I see it in the community that I was a member of in Dallas for years, which is primarily liberal, professional, well-educated. And these people are completely uninformed about what's really going on, because we all live in an information environment that for some people that remain within the corporate media is tightly controlled. And so you could say something to people that is fairly easily established as true, and they would say, I haven't heard that. Or, if that were true, I would have heard it on TV. Because there's been a real effort that's been made to divide us using social issues and to prevent us from seeing the behind the screen, the economics of what's behind the monopolization, the financialization, where we're now all being turned into a monthly payment for some corporation, and the militarization that's basically destroying our world. And the whole climate movement can be easily exposed by asking one question: why are none of these people talking about war and militarism, which is far and beyond the largest contributor to climate change? And if you're really concerned about the climate, why not work with nature? Why not take a look at the situation holistically, rather than adopting policies that will entrench the power of the vested interest while diminishing the power and authority over our own lives by ordinary people? So that would be my comment as far as some of the things that Lisa and Maria have commented on. As far as the dollar is concerned, I look at that and I see where the trends are going. But a whole lot more work and effort has to go into this before I think we will see a real movement away from the dollar. And the reason for that is that the dollar is entrenched within the financial system and within the system of trade. And it's easy. It's standardized. Insurance companies understand it. It's easy to move goods. And until there are structures that are set up that make opposing efforts to conduct trade in denominations other than the dollar easier, more certain, easier to move goods, I think the dollar will remain entrenched. But all of these economic conditions that have been building over the last 100 years are coming to a head. And I think a lot of people realize that these trends will result in some kind of a crisis, which will force people to take a look at these structures in order to force change. I think this is one of the reasons why we see what's going on in Ukraine going on, why we hear the rhetoric that we hear about Russia. Russia is a very wealthy place. It's unencumbered. There's not a lot of debt. The people of Russia are not highly in debt. And the banking system is highly indebted in the West. The countries in the West are highly indebted, and they need unencumbered assets to basically allow them to escape the debt bomb that has been created. So we live in interesting times, as the Chinese curse says, but I think times where there is real hope that people around the world, ordinary people, can come together and to realize that people can in fact change their lives, and that these entrenched elites do not have to be perpetuated. They are not wise people. They do not have human interests at heart. They do not care about the economy. They care about their own economy. They care about their own power. And I think that we're seeing signs around the globe that there's an uprising against this. And one of the things that Maria has said is very, very true. There's an effort to demonize this, to demonize the idea of populism, to demonize the idea that ordinary people have the intelligence to be able to create a new world, and to try to frighten people into remaining in this system that is becoming increasingly inhuman. So we don't have a choice, basically, Regis. I think people have to come together in order to envision a different future, a future that's not financialized, a future that's not monopolized, a future that's not militarized.
Well, thank you, Sylvia, for that. What I hear is that out of all of the turmoil, chaos, wars, people having financial difficulties, there is hope. And we're seeing signs of this hope everywhere. I think each of you has made that very clear. Now, I want to share something with you. One of our viewers, Chris, had this to say, and I'm posting it here on the screen. She wants to thank each of you wonderful women who, unlike our female politicians who have been trained to think and act like men, are true representatives of their sex, showing knowledge, honesty, and empathy. I want to thank you for that, Chris, because that's exactly why I wanted to do this show, because I've known each of these three women and a handful of others who represent not just their sex, but I think represent all of us with their very balanced and informed knowledge and opinions, visions of what is happening. So I'm really happy. And from a personal point of view, I really wish that more Russian people could hear this kind of a conversation. They get very little, we get very little of it here. People are concerned, as I've said many times, with living their lives as they always do, completely aware that their country is at war against the United States, most of Europe, and other countries around the world. They're aware of that, but they're not dwelling on that. The people here are not depressed. As Sylvia said, the economy is quite good here. Prices have risen, there's no doubt about that, but people are making do and are not being overwhelmed. Now, I'd like to ask you, each of you, we have maybe 20 minutes left. Is there anything that you would like to say to people in Russia? Because we do have a number of viewers here. It's not large, but I think and would hope that it would grow if people here could be exposed to what you folks have been saying. So I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia first this time. What is it you would like to say to Russian people, Sylvia?
I would like to say that a growing percentage of the American population is beginning to realize that we have been bamboozled. And this bamboozling goes back a long way. If I may, the fact that the United States back in 1972, 73, through the 1990s, did not accept Russia's offer of friendship and instead decided to continue this hostility against Russia has harmed the United States greatly. If it can be imagined what the situation would be in the United States had we been reasonable in terms of demilitarizing and accepting this offer of friendship. After all, throughout American history previous to this time, Russia had always been an ally of the United States. Russia had assisted us in the Revolutionary War, had assisted in maintaining the Union during the Civil War. and had never been an enemy of the United States. Militarism created the conditions for Russia to become an enemy, because after World War II, in order to not demilitarize, the United States continued to need an enemy, and the Soviet Union was very convenient from that perspective. I also want to say that I think when Trump got elected in 2016, that really put a serious hitch into plans, because I have a sneaky suspicion that it was in the works that there would be a war in Ukraine would be provoked, and it would be provoked early in the term of Hillary Clinton. And I also suspect that going back at least to 2007, when President Putin gave his speech at Munich, that Russia had begun to realize that unfortunately they needed to prepare for the potentiality that there would be war with the United States. I think that's probably one reason for the intervention in Syria in 2015 at the invitation of the Syrian government, so that some of the plans and reorganization could be tested, some of the weapons could be tested in preparation for the undesired but suspected possibility that the United States would continue and would do everything possible to provoke war. Well, the intervention of another 4 years allowed greater preparation to take place, so that I think, Regis, part of the reason why Russians may be a lot calmer than would be otherwise the case is the fact that I think their government and their leadership has understood what the reality of the situation is, and has been preparing for this reality for some time. And that I think the Russian people understand that they have a competent government that is planning to try to minimize what the plans are in the West, and is trying to develop alternative strategies to derail this from actually happening. Because one of the things that I see happening is the use of this war as a means of exhausting the West and allowing sufficient time for the populations of the West to wake up and to realize that they're being used by a very small cabal of people that have been entrenched in power in the United States and in the West for some time, and that this cabal does not have their interest at heart, and that this cabal is making a desperate play, and let me emphasize, a desperate play to remain in power through the exercise of war and through the uncertainty and the desperation that war creates. And let's not fall for it, folks. We do over and over and over again. They create fear. They create all of these contingencies, and they force people to go along with their plans for war. Let's not do it. I admire and appreciate the patience and the intelligence of the Russian people in being calm under these circumstances. We know over history that the Russian people have been tested over and over again by the violence and the aggression of the West in war after war on Russian soil, in an effort to try to break the will of the Russian people. And the Russian people have always withstood that and have been a light, really, to the rest of the world in how people can exercise bravery and compassion and defeat the forces that seek to basically control every aspect of our lives in this world. So I think the worm, as we can say, is turning. And every day I see more and more people begin to question what's going on, and to realize that in the United States, we no longer have a democracy, that we have an oligarchy that is not at all interested in what we think or have to say, or whether or not our lives are reasonable and our futures are secure. And I believe and hope that a majority of the people of the United States will begin to realize that, and that realization will come before there's a wider war. But it's going to be a close question. So, in solidarity with my brothers and sisters in Russia, I say, let's hope for peace.
Wow. I hope a lot of Russian people can hear that. I have to completely agree with you on the little historical testimony you gave about how from our American Revolution to World War II, Russia has been our most important ally throughout all those years, our most important friend. A lot of Russian people know that. I mean, they've learned that in their history books. So thank you for that, Sylvia. Maria, I just want to put this up. Another one of our viewers, Sam Phillip, had this to say. Thank you all for being the voice of sanity and peace. Thank you for that, Sam. Maria, I'm going to come to you now. What would you like to say to the Russian people as a person from Greece, a country that has had a very, very thousands of year history with Russia, and especially here in Crimea? Your thoughts?
Well, I would like to say that our government does not speak for the Greek people. Greeks are always in solidarity with the Russian people. We have our common religion, we have our deep historical roots, we have common cultural characteristics, and we have this very traitorous government. I mean, Politico had this article the other day that because Mitsotakis is the most staunch anti-Russia president in the EU, that they are thinking of replacing van der Leyen with Mitsotakis, but they are only thinking that that might provoke the Turks. So you can understand how ashamed Greeks are, and me personally, of having this representation of the Greeks through the government. But I am sure that the Russians know this, because polls that have been made show that Greeks are among the people of Europe. Greeks, Cypriots, and Bulgarians are among the people who are most close to Russia. So, this is something that I hope that Russian people know, that, you know, we are also trapped by this governmental position that the ruling class and the global elite also have imposed on us, trapping us. They have indebted us, they have destroyed our economy, but they cannot destroy the Greek Orthodox psyche. So that is one thing that I would like to tell Russians, and also the fact that these governments are not representing their people, as the recent EU elections show. And I really hope that at some point Europe and Russia can unite, because we are one civilization. Putin said the other day that the West has quit from its tradition, from its culture, its civilization, and now this has been kept on living in Eastern Europe, which is Russia. So I do hope that someday there might be some wakening up in Europe, and the Eurasia common culture can come together. We have so many things admirable that Russians have created, one of the greatest civilizations of humanity, and the West will only be impoverished and decimated if Russia drifts apart from the European Christian world.
Well, thank you for that, Maria. You mentioned a couple of things that are very important. Orthodoxy is something that binds Greece and Russia. Christianity, if you want to look at all across Europe, which most of it is Roman Catholic. So religion has been something that's been very important to holding both peoples, Greeks and Russians, together throughout thousands of years of history, much longer than Europe, much longer certainly than the 400 or 500 years of history in the United States. The other thing you mentioned, which I think is very important, not just for Russians, although I think they probably realize that better than people in the United States, Eurasia. That continent is connected from Portugal, really, you can say, all the way over to China. This is going to be, I think, the most important power center in the world if we can survive the current crisis. United States is so far away across the ocean. In fact, both oceans, they're separated from the rest of the world. I think there's great hope in the BRICS and this pan-Eurasian awareness. Much easier and better for Russians and Europeans to be friends than for all of them to be friends with somebody so far away that has caused so much death and destruction throughout all of its history. Lisa, your thoughts?
Thanks, Regis. And thanks for, this has been really a fascinating discussion. Thanks for bringing me together with these wise women. I'm just going to speak for myself and say what I would like Russians to know is that I really envy you for your leadership. You have real adults who actually seem to care for the people in charge. And that is something that the United States in my lifetime has never had. I just yesterday watched a really good webinar put on that was offered by Global Women for Peace United Against NATO, that had speakers from North America and also Europe, Northern Europe, talking about the militarization of the Arctic. And it went a long way to explain why propaganda machines are constantly pumping out Russophobia, for consumption by Americans. It's Russia has a lot of natural resources that the U.S. empire is very greedy for. And we can recognize that there are a lot of lies being told. I thought that when President Putin and President Xi put out a joint statement right before the Beijing Olympics, right before it was the Winter Olympics, it must have been January 2022, where they essentially laid out a really well thought out, carefully planned and written agreement between those two great, huge civilizations and powerful countries in Eurasia. And essentially it boiled down to, in my reading of it, we have each other's backs now. We just want you to be aware we have each other's backs now. I'm very jealous of countries that have mature leadership that isn't perfect, but it has the best interests of the people in mind. My nation, as Sylvia pointed out so well, eloquently, has the best interest of very wealthy corporations in mind, and they couldn't care less about the people. So might makes right is has been the guiding philosophy of the U.S. Well, we're not that mighty anymore. And there's a lot of denial about that. It never did make right. But I think that we are a big danger to the survival of humans because we have nuclear weapons and we don't seem to have a mature sense that, sometimes they say the grandmothers keep life going because they look to, okay, how are we going to keep the younger generations alive? What do we need to do that? I so wish we had that kind of leadership. Instead, we have pantsuit nation types of women that have clawed their way to the top of a violent patriarchy. So they're, no better leaders than the males that are in there. I think we have a lot to learn from the way Russia conducts its business. And I don't agree with everything. I'm not sure I'd be as happy as you are, Regis, living in Russia, but maybe I would. Certainly people have moved there for political reasons and say, wow, this is great. I also want to thank Tanya, your wife, for saying to you, Regis, you've got to do a show with women, which you told me about. So thanks to Tanya for that great idea. And, let's keep talking to each other. We know that we have common humanity and we care for each other. We don't need to be enemies.
Yeah, another good friend. Thank you for that, Lisa, but I want you to see it. Andre from Montreal has been to Russia, is a very dear friend. Russia has discovered power through generosity, and I think that's true. I can't thank you enough. I want to let those people who are viewing this live and those who will view it later online on a number of my channels that we're going to continue this series with Sylvia, Maria, and Lisa on a somewhat regular basis, maybe every couple of weeks, because I've been really reinvigorated by this conversation tonight. I've known the three of you, Lisa for the longest time, but Sylvia personally, Maria personally online. I can't thank you enough, and I'm going to look forward to continuing discussions with your views, which are really different than all of those women that have been clawing their way to the top. I want to say a couple of things in closing. Lisa mentioned perhaps the most important document that has been written maybe in our lifetimes. It was that joint declaration of President Xi and Putin after the Beijing Olympics. I wish people would take a look at that document. It's freely available all over the place online. I think it's really significant. I used to think that the United States Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution were two of the most important documents that have ever been written, and I still believe that. It's unfortunate that those people who have controlled a country have never let us live up to and realize the importance of those two documents. I do want to end by saying this, that Sylvia, Maria, and Lisa are friends of Crimea, friends of Russia. And I want to thank them so much for that. And I want to let other people know who may be watching this, especially in the United States, you too can become a friend of Crimea and a friend of Russia. You can do that by contacting me on any of the channels that you will view this video. We have some 40 people now in the United States. Quite a number have been here to Russia in recent years who are friends of Crimea and are working diligently in their own way to promote peace and friendship between our two countries, something so important. I want to thank you so much, Lisa, Sylvia, and Maria, for taking the time to join me tonight. It's been rich. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Regis and Sylvia and Maria. Thank you.